Hi guys, and welcome back to the Crawl Corner. We're here once again in this wonderful ranty corner for all things Formula E. So, 2024 Formula E season is a go, with the Mexico E-Prix finishing on Saturday evening for us in the UK. And what could be said, it was a tame affair to get the season going, it must be said. Wasn't much on-track action or overtakes, just a one safety car period for a minor on-track collision. But other than that, relatively tame affair. Expected really, as the drivers sort of finished. We knew which powertrains were strong, which ones were weak, and that has carried forward from Season 9 into Season 10. And yeah, it was a very mundane affair by most racing standards, not just Formula E, but for Formula E it was a little bit meh, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I'm sure things will get hot and spicy again in Diriyah. Diriyah normally provides an exciting race, and that's a double-header, of course, in a couple of weekends' time. So looking forward to that. But right now, we're here to talk about the Mexico E-Prix, and I'm going to rate the drivers accordingly based on how I felt their weekend went. So if you've never seen this series before, I award the drivers out of a maximum of 10 points based on their overall weekend's performance, and I go all the way down to 0 if they have a particularly bad one. On the rare occasion, I do award minus points to those drivers that do something extra special during a race, and also on the rare occasion, I do award minus points to those drivers that do something extra special, but for all the wrong reasons. Now, we've got no scoreboard to show you at the moment because, of course, it is the first round of the season. So, instead, we're going to start the season off with a giveaway because I am that generous and that nice to you all. So, all you have to do is be subscribed to the channel. You have to like the video and comment down below what was your favourite moment of the race, or just anything in general. Anything in general to do with the actual race itself. Let me know in the comments below. I'll pick one of you at random, and one of you can win this. It is the Gen 2 Season 5 display model. So that was the one that the Formula E Championship announced to the world. This was the model that was, of course, released based on the celebration of the Gen 2 era coming into fruition in Formula E, and that is the accurate model representation of the actual model that Formula E showed off to all the teams when the Gen 2 era was coming. So yeah, all you have to do, like I say, is be subscribed to the channel, drop a like on the video, and comment down below your favourite moment of the race, or your worst bit of the moment of the race. Anything to do with the race, basically. So I know you watched it. That's all I'm going to say. So you know you watched it. And I'll pick one comment out at random. So yeah, you've got a chance to win that. I'll announce the winner in the comment section and we'll go from there, really. I've not really thought it out much in that advance, but I've got a spare one of those. So I thought, a great way to kick the season off with. So let's kick things off then with the race winner, of course, Pascal Wehrlein in the Porsche. What a fantastic race weekend he had overall. Porsche, once again, the dominant powertrain. We knew they would be. Themselves and the Jaguar powertrains were looking like the most speedy, the most fast, of course. We saw that last season as well. This season's all about the hardware's been homologated, but you can update the software. So there's been a lot of work behind the scenes on how to try and get the car more efficient just from a software point of view, but the hardware has remained the same. So that means that Porsche and the Jaguar teams do have the advantage going into the start of the season, and it was very much advantage Pascal Wehrlein this weekend, wasn't it? A stunning pole position that time, beating Sebastian Vettel by a good couple of tenths there. And in the race, played the attack modes quite well, slipped back a couple of times, of course, during the attack mode zones, but stayed right on the back and on the gearbox of Sebastian Vettel to make sure that, of course, when Sebastian took the attack mode, he was back into the lead again. Saved the energy when he needed to save it, behind Sebastian Vettel, punching a hole in the air, of course, so he could get a bit more energy reduction and use a lot less energy, and then was able to break away. Sebastian Vettel made a slight mistake towards the latter stages of the race where the gap went from like 1.5 seconds to 2.5 seconds, and that's all Wehrlein needed, just to know that he was safe. He could save energy up front. He'd lost the slipstream to Sebastian Vettel as well, and was able to just bring the car home for a fantastic victory for Porsche and a fantastic victory for Pascal Wehrlein. So yeah, it was great to see him do ever so well, and of course with a pole position lap time, with a race victory, played the strategic game well with the attack mode. It's got to be a perfect 10, hasn't it, to kick the season off with for Pascal Wehrlein, and it's as simple as that. Simple as that. A perfect 10 to Pascal Wehrlein on what was a perfect weekend. Next up, as already mentioned, of course, finishing in second place was Sebastian Vettel, and a great return to form for Sebastian, it must be said. Last season he was very on pace but very unlucky, and this season it looks like, fingers crossed, he can turn those fortunes around and he can be a dominant driver that's trying to go for the championship. That Envision car is quick. It was quick last season. Of course, they took the team's title last year, didn't they? And yeah, it's a quick car. It's got quick drivers in it. And Sebastian Vettel delivered the results, of course. Locking out the front row alongside Pascal Wehrlein. P2 start. He had a stunning lap, a stellar lap in the semi-finals to beat Nick Cassidy, wasn't it, that he was beating in the semi-final. And we were hoping for that again in the final, so he could actually take a pole position. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be, and he just lined up in P2. As mentioned, he led a couple of laps during the race. Although, according to that little timing thing that was there, that was really silly, wasn't it? Did anyone else see that during the race, where they was coming around the final corner onto the start finish lines, like bit of runoff, and they put like a graphic there, and it said like 221 laps to go, 118 laps to go. Like, well, someone's fucked up big time here with this. I think it was finally accurate, like 3 laps from the end, and then they added the additional 2 on, so then it was wrong again. That was quite funny, and just something I watched. I was like, that's really shit. Come on, if you're going to put graphics, at least make them right. So yeah, Sebastian Vettel though led a few laps of the race, but ultimately the combination of the Porsche powertrain and Pascal Wehrlein was just a little bit too strong for Vettel, but nonetheless good to see him up here in P2. Himself kicking himself a little bit about not getting that pole position, and was also a little bit kicking himself for the mistake that he made that allowed Wehrlein just to get that little bit of a breathing space on him, so that he was able just to save his energy and not be hounded from behind. Yeah, ultimately though, Sebastian Vettel, a great start to his season for Envision, and for that reason I'm going to score him 9.5 to Sebastian Vettel. After knocking a half a point off, just because I think that, yeah, there was a pole position lap time in there, just didn't quite deliver it in the final, but I will allow him a little bit of slack, and of course that little mistake that he made. Would he have got Wehrlein? I don't think even with that mistake he'd have been able to attack Wehrlein, because Mexico is such a difficult circuit to overtake, but nonetheless, Vettel did a stunning job. So yes, 9.5 to Sebastian Vettel, and a great start to the season for him. In third place, we come to Nick Cassidy in his newly acquired Jaguar team. Yeah, this is a formidable duo, I am sure, with Jaguar and Nick Cassidy at the helm. This season, though, and this race, it must be said, I was expecting, to be honest with you, a front row lockout from the Jaguars. They've managed to get themselves in a place where during the duels that they were only ever going to meet each other in the final, if they did get that far. But both of them were knocked out in the semi-finals, and they both had a one-place grid penalty, respective for disobeying a track infringement for disobeying red flags in free practice 1. So, yeah, they should have been 3rd and 4th, but lined up 4th and 5th. I think that's how it was in the end. So Nick Cassidy came from 4th to finish 3rd. And the way he did that was by overtaking Max Gunter, who the Maserati team didn't quite get the strategy right with the attack modes. They left Gunter out a little bit longer to take his first attack compared to the others, and he wasn't just able to get a good enough gap over Cassidy. So when he took his first or second attack, that Cassidy slipped through. And that was that for Maxi Gunz. So for Cassidy, though, a podium on his debut for Jaguar is not to be sniffed at all. And for that reason, I'm going to award Nick Cassidy 9 points. 9 points to Nick Cassidy. Maybe a little bit generous by half a point there, I would say, but it's the first race of the season. We're just finding his feet with everyone at the moment for now, and we'll see how things go on. But yeah, Nick Cassidy beat Mitch Evans, which has been the stalwart for the Jaguar team for such a long time, which is always a huge positive going into a new team with a strong teammate. You know, you've got to keep your guard up and think, right, I've got to deliver. And Nick Cassidy did just that, so a perfect run for him, really. It'd have been a little bit disappointed not to be P2 or, in fact, winning the race. I'm sure that would have been Jaguar's hopes. But picking up a podium and fastest lap points as well, it must be said, was a great effort by Nick Cassidy. So, yes, an impressive run for him. 9 points on the board for Nick. Securing that 4th place finish was Maxi Gunz after starting the race in P3. He held P3 for quite a number of laps and did really, really well. But as all the other teams first started to take their first attack mode, Maxi Gunz didn't. Obviously a team strategy there by Maserati to take the attack modes later. But ultimately then all the cars had caught back up to him again, and it meant when he took his final and second attack mode, all the other cars had finished. So once he lost the position to Nick Cassidy, that was that. It was P4 for him. Very difficult difficult circuit to overtake, even with the attack mode, and he wasn't able to do anything and was mainly just monitoring the cars behind to make sure they didn't get past him. But yeah, nonetheless, you know, Maxi Gunz, I said it was either going to be kill it or cure it for him, didn't I, this season with the Maserati squad. Lucky to get that second opportunity after being such a shunter in the first half of last season. But I said if he found his feet, he'd do well. And okay, we had that crash in practice, didn't we? Practice 1 was a little bit unfortunate there, sliding into the wall and damaging the rear suspension. A little bit needless that early on into a session with a very dusty track. But he got it together for the rest of the session, for the rest of the race, and delivered a solid P4 finish. So for that reason, I'm going to award Maxi Gunz 8 points. 8 points for me. I have to knock a couple of points off just for that little silly incident in FP1 because, yeah, it was needless. Not much damage to the car, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse and did cost him track time. Maybe with that additional track time, we could have seen Maserati evaluate their their strategy a little bit more, and we could have seen them on the podium. But you never know, do you? But yeah, for that reason, Maxi Gunz, not going to be too harsh with him, but do have to knock a couple of points off. It's 8 points to him. Finishing in 5th place and a distant 5th compared to the top 4, it must be said, it is Mitch Evans in the Jaguar. Now, initially he said he had a great start off the line and was looking well and was looking racy and pacey, but then after he took the first attack mode, he said something just went wrong with the car, really. They're not sure if it was an issue with the car on taking attack mode or whether it was just that's just when the problem started to manifest, but really struggling to manage his rear tyres. He said he was getting a lot of spin up and a lot of traction loss out of the corners, and it meant that pretty much from that point on he was a sitting duck. So was staying P5, lost the gap to the cars ahead, so was effectively then the lead runner of the next gaggle behind him, and by the end of the race he held off all the way down to P14, I think, in the end, didn't he? It was something ridiculous like that. It was he had a big gaggle of cars behind him, and he was very fortunate that Mexico is such a difficult circuit to overtake, and he's also thankful that the Jaguar powertrain had the brilliant exit out of that final corner down the long start finish straight, because that really held everyone else off. If he had a poor exit out of that last corner, everyone else was going to breeze past him, but as it was, he was able to pull away there. By the time the other cars caught up, it was in sections that they couldn't really overtake and couldn't afford to stick a nose in up the inside, so weren't able to do so. It's it's very surprising and a shame to see Mitch Evans down here, but nonetheless, you know, at the end of the day, he's the experienced one in the Jaguar squad, and you would have expected a little bit more from him. You know, again, a 1-place grid penalty for an FP1 infringement, disobeying red flags, and yeah, you know, it's just one of those things. It's first race of the season. He picks up 10 points. It could have been a hell of a lot worse. Had he got it wrong out that last corner, he could have been outside the points because everyone would have just dragged past him. So yeah, he did put up a brilliant defence, but for me personally, I think 7.5 is fair for Mitch Evans right now. I don't think he was as impressive as the top 4 ahead, but did have to put an impressive defensive drive to maintain that P5. So yeah, 7.5 for Mitch Evans. In 6th place, we come to JeanEric Vergne in the DS Penske. It looked a solid car, that Penske, didn't it? It did look like it was okay. It was doing okay. It was very much an okay car. This is where it should be finishing. I think it's going to be a struggle to match and beat the Porsche and Jaguar powertrains on a regular basis, but they were there challenging and harrying the back of Mitch Evans. Had it been any other circuit, I think we could have seen JeanEric Vergne through. He was very frustrated behind him, wasn't he? He was trying to have a look and a dive and a nibble and just like showing his intent, but as mentioned with Evans already, down that straight was able to pull a nice gap, and then the rest of the lap was just all about catching up, and then when he caught up, couldn't re-overtake him. He gains a couple of places from his starting position as well, which is decent. Actually did an overtake on Jake Hughes, didn't he? Did JeanEric Vergne. That was like one of the few actual overtakes we got to see. But yeah, nonetheless, did an actual overtake on Jake Hughes, which was good to see. And yeah, for me personally, JeanEric Vergne was a solid first race of the season for me personally, and I've awarded him 8 points. 8 points. I think that's pretty much where the Penske was expected to be. Shame we couldn't get past Mitch Evans, but did a good overtake there to get ahead of Jake Hughes in that McLaren. And they're who they're going to be battling with throughout most of the season and got the advantage against them. I think when we come to other circuits, maybe the DS Penske will show a little bit more pace here and there. I'm still expecting podiums from them, but for now, a P6 finish was very solid. Harry in the back of a Jaguar, I think they can be happy with that result. So yeah, for JeanEric Vergne, 8 points to him. Finishing in that 7th place, as already mentioned, is Jake Hughes in the McLaren, picking up a few points for them. He looked to be decent, didn't he? It really must be said. His new teammate Sam Bird once again was fruitless, but we'll come to him in a moment. But yeah, Jake Hughes, solid. absolutely solid, and you can't say fairer than that. Qualified P6, finished P7. He did well to get inside the duels. The McLaren car's not the best of them all, but it's certainly not the worst. Very much around the DS Penske area, so he would have liked to have kept JeanEric Vergne behind him. Wasn't to be this time around. Overall, tame affair for Jake, kept himself out of trouble, but he did have that silly accident in FP1, didn't he, where he went fastest of the session and then went into turn 1 just a little bit too hot, buoyed with a little bit of confidence there, setting the fastest time and stuffed it heavily into the wall. Thankfully, no long-lasting damage to the chassis. It was the front right corner and the front wing there, but the rest of it, yeah, unfortunately, he was just came home P7. But yeah, that was a silly error there in free practice that I don't like to see. But nonetheless, Jake Hughes, I have awarded him a solid 7 for this weekend. I have knocked him a point or point and a half maybe off for that silly error in FP1 where you just really just need to bed the car in. But nonetheless, impressive weekend by Jake Hughes. You know, out-qualified, out-raced his teammate. Can't do fairer than that. And was fighting with the DS Penskes. Then in P8 we come to Stvan Dwn in the second of the DS Penske cars. Again, Stvan Dwn really has done all he can do with the Penske, to be honest with you there. Stuck in that big old gaggle and big old trainer cars, all behind Mitch Evans these. And unfortunately just couldn't get through, couldn't get round Jake Hughes. But it was good to see him matching his teammate, JeanEric Vergne, where in previous season he was like slightly further away, wasn't he? Last season, you know, there was JeanEric Vergne taking pole positions and victories and podiums, and sometimes even Van Dorn was struggling to score points in those races. So this time around it was very much an even affair for the DS Penske squad, it must be said. And yeah, was good to see, to be honest with you. So for Stvan Dwn, again, short and sweet because not much happened in his race. I have awarded him 7.5. I think he needs a little bit less than his teammate, but not too much. Just half a point difference there between the two of them, because overall it was a good weekend for both of them. Solid. I don't think they were really going to be expecting anything more than that. Maybe Van Dorn could have got ahead of Jake Hughes, but didn't quite manage it. But as mentioned, such a difficult circuit to overtake at. I think overall 7.5 is fair. So yeah, well done Van Dorn. A solid start to your season. Hope for more to come in Diriyah. In 9th place, we come to Jake Dennis in the Andretti. A poor qualifying performance by Andretti and by Jake Dennis sees him qualifying P14, was it in the end? And last year's winner that dominated it is only here picking up a couple of points. He did a great run though. He went from 14th to 9th in the first 2 laps, which was absolutely fantastic, and then stayed there. That's it. Such is the nature of the slipstreaming in Formula E, and the difficulty in overtaking at Mexico meant that Jake Dennis just couldn't get round or couldn't get through anyone, unfortunately. But he does pick up a couple of points to consolidate what was a difficult weekend. At least he scored something, didn't he? And hopefully his title challenge can mount from here. The Andretti squad admitted that they weren't quite happy with the setup in free practice 2, so elected to mix things up a bit for qualifying, which is where it all went wrong. They reverted back for the race, which meant that, of course, they were more racy than they were, because wherever they went in qualifying was totally wrong. And, yeah, for the race, they were racy. They made the positions at the early phases of the race, but then got stuck in a train of cars. And that was that. So yeah, unfortunately a little bit of a team error there. Jake Dennis would have been nice to see him a little bit higher up, but nonetheless I think that he's had a good race, a solid weekend. Nice to see him get inside the points and gain a good few positions after a difficult qualifying. But nonetheless, I think he only deserves 6.5 for me personally for Jake. Overall, yeah, they could have gone the wrong way with the setup, but with Jake's experience and how he was last season, sometimes he could drive anything, and it looked like it was just a difficult race to get back into it. So hopefully Diriyah will be better to come for him, not just for Jake, but for the Andretti squad as a whole. But for now, just 6.5 to Jake Dennis. And in 10th place, it is Norman Natto in the Nissan. No, it's not in the Nissan, is he now? It's Norman Natto in the Andretti. I've lost my little saying, but never mind. Norman Natto once again proving that he is a solid teammate to Jake Dennis, of course. He was solid in the Nissan squad last year, and it looks like, yeah, you know, it's a difficult race for Andretti. And last year, we actually had Jake Dennis win and Andre Lotterer finishing 4th, which was like ridiculous now when we look back at it and think, Christ almighty. How then did Andre Lotterer only pick up like another 10 points in the rest of the races when he scored 12 in that one? Unbelievable, I know. But yeah, at least it is a double point score for the Andretti squad, although it is on the end of the top 10. Norman Natto could do nothing more than that. Actually beat Jake Dennis in qualifying, actually by a position. And in the race itself, was able to follow Jake Dennis through and pick up a point, which again, he gained the places on the first lap. And then that was it, just stayed 10th for the rest of it. So a very difficult race by the pair of Andretti's, but good to see that Norman Natto already in these early stages, albeit a difficult set of circumstances with the team going the wrong way in qualifying for the setup. It's good to see that Norman Natto was able to match Jake Dennis throughout the race weekend, in qualifying, in the race and in practice sessions as well. So yeah, that was encouraging to see, and hope for more to come again for the Andretti squad and for Norman Natto. But again, he's going to get the same points as what I have awarded Jake Dennis, which is 6.5 to him. And yeah, that's that. Then we come to the cars that just finished outside the points. And the first on this list is, of course, Oliver Roland in the Nissan. Unfortunately for him, he had a difficult qualifying. I think he was bundled in with the group where Lucas Di Grassi stuffed it into the wall, didn't he, on the final flying lap, which meant the cars obviously couldn't get a lap in, and he was outside of the dual zone and was well down the order, not really setting in a full representative lap time. Ollie Roland, difficult then, starting in 20th position. But in the race, made 9 places up to finish 11th. It's a shame it wasn't 10 to give him that one position. But I think overall, from a difficult qualifying and what was a frustrating day for him at that moment, okay, coming away with points, you'd think, oh, you know, that is a shame. But it's shown that there is a lot more to come from that Nissan car. Clearly has the race pace, clearly has the strategy to overtake cars as they're taking attack zones, etc. But for, you know, Oliver Roland had to put some good racing in, put some good performance in, gain the places that he needed to gain. One away from points, but after starting down in 20th at a circuit that is renowned for being difficult to overtake, it was a really, really good effort. So yeah, for me personally, I think Oliver Roland deserves a solid 7. I've maybe been harsh there by a point, but again, early days, finding his feet with the Cruel Room Championship, finding who's where in the pecking order. But for now, yeah, I think that's a fair score for Ollie Roland, and we'll see how he gets on for the rest of the season. But if he can have a good qualifying and then make his way up through the field again, like we've seen previously for him, it could be inside the top 5 at that. You know, if he gets himself into the duels, then has an impressive race, who knows? Who knows? But that Nissan was matching everything else in terms of pace-wise. Was on the back of the gaggle with Mitch Evans as well, so unlucky not to pick up a point. But yeah, for now, Ollie Roland, a solid 7 to him. Finishing 12th place, it is Oliver Roland's teammate in the other Nissan. It is Sasha Fenestraz. So yeah, you know, again, matching his teammate was decent. Out-qualified his teammate, of course, but was ultimately outraced at him at the end there with a position between them both. But again, just outside the top 10 must be a little bit frustrating for Nissan. They'd have been hoping to come away with some points, sort of like they'd be expected to match the McLarens and DS Penske's, but it wasn't to be this time around. But nonetheless, you know, again, an impressive performance by Sasha Fenestraz, a solid effort, nothing special outside the points, but I feel 6.5 is fair for Sasha. I think he deserves a little bit less than Oliver Roland for the fact that he out-qualified him, but unfortunately was outraced by him in the end, and Oliver Roland did put in some impressive drives there to get through the field and get up into the 11th position. Sasha Fenestraz, solid enough, but nothing spectacular, so 6.5 to him. Finishing in an unlucky for some 13th place, it is Eduardo Mortara in the Mahindra. And what could be said for Eduardo Mortara's race, really? That Mahindra's looking very backmarkerish, more than I expected, it must be said. Qualifying went okay, didn't it? I think it was inside the top 15, if I remember rightly from memory. Somewhere around there anyway. It wasn't right at the very back or in the depths of the back, but certainly obviously wasn't anything spectacular or special. But nonetheless, you know, the race itself went okay for him, and here he is finishing in 13th place, which I think for the Mahindra at the moment, when Mahindra themselves this weekend says, don't judge us by how we started Mexico last season, judge us by our last 5 races last season. And their last 5 races last season in Season 9 were absolutely awful, if I recall. I don't think they picked up any points at all, apart from one impressive drive from Di Grassi at London, if I remember rightly, where he picked up a few, if I'm getting that right. But nonetheless, the rest of those 5 races were abysmal. So yeah, you know, it was a difficult one to kind of judge. And then when you heard that from Mahindra, you're like, okay, we might be in for a tougher time than initially expected. So yeah, P13 for Eduardo Mortara overall. A great effort, really. After a solid qualifying for the car he's in, didn't stack it into the wall, didn't do any silly errors, didn't take anyone out, didn't take himself out, you know, didn't run wide. He had a faultless weekend this weekend, did Mortara. So for me personally, personally, I think he is due a solid 7.5 from me. Maybe a little bit generous by half a point there, but I think he is due a solid 7.5. A faultless weekend by him in a car that's clearly difficult machinery, but did what he could with the car he had and only finished 3 places away from the points and in the gaggle that was all being held up by Mitch Evans. I think that's impressive. So yeah, a solid 7.5 to Eduardo Mortara. Next up in 14th place, we come to Sam Bird in the McLaren. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Now, he missed out on the duels, unlike his teammate. His teammate Jake Hughes, of course, got and sailed into the duels. In the race itself for Sam Bird, he didn't. He started himself in 11th or 12th place, didn't he? And then in the race, he was running round in that 11th area, then went for an attack mode and lost 4 places, and was down to 15th, and then was able to recover 1. And ended the race in 14th. So yeah, very, very lacklustre. The team admitted that they missed his final run time in qualifying by a second. That was their error, otherwise he would have been inside the duel, so I'll allow him that. But in the race itself, everyone else was only ever losing really 1 position during the attack zones, and somehow Bird managed to lose 3, 4. So yeah, very disappointing. So for Sam Bird, I'm not going to be too harsh on him for now, but again, it's cracks in the armour already, showing that he's not really deserving to be there anymore. It's going to be 4 points for me, for him. Yeah, tough one to take, it must be said. Looked like there were going to be some hope there and some flashes of brilliance in the free practice sessions where it was looking solid. But in the qualifying and racing itself, wasn't to be. 4 to Sam Bird. Finishing in 15th place, we of course come to Nick de Vries, who unfortunately didn't have the debut he was really wanting or expecting, was he? Let's be honest. Now already we've admitted that the Mahindra car isn't looking the best, but unfortunately this time around, where did he qualify? I can't remember if it was actually stone dead last or 21st, but he was on the back row of the grid anyway, wasn't he? And then in the race itself, we didn't really get to see much of him. The back of the pack with the Evans train ended with Sam Bird, so then everyone else that was like 15th downwards that were finishers were very much on their own and very lonely off the pace compared to everyone else. And that one was Nick de Vries as well. So let's not forget, yeah, he is a Season 7 champion in Formula E. Absolutely fantastic. Well done to him for that. But it is his first time dealing with the Gen 3 car, and obviously he's just getting to grips with it. But again, no mistakes, no errors, didn't put anything wrong, didn't take anyone out, didn't hit anyone, didn't hit anything, and was just solid. So yeah, for me personally, for Nick de Vries, baptism of fire. A car that's difficult to drive. Mortara got the best out of it. De Vries a little bit on the slow side and getting up to speed at the moment. So for that reason, it's going to be 5.5 to Nick de Vries. Can't criticise him too much. You need to give him a few races to get up to speed. The car's not that great, but overall, don't want to, slag him off too much. But he was off the pace. So yeah, 5.5 to Nick de Vries. And next up, of course, we come to Jehan Daruvala in the fellow Maserati. So, of course, Maxi Gunz up there, challenging for a podium. Great qualifying effort. And Jehan was down the pecking order in qualifying, around 16th, 17th. Nothing spectacular there. And in the race itself, again, finishing here in 16th place is nothing to write home about. But the main thing is, again, the rookie this season, the only official rookie this season into the championship. It's going to be a very difficult set of circumstances for him to enter. Let's not forget, of course, they had the whole, testing, and then testing, some of the days were cancelled, of course, due to the fire that the Mahindra squad had. So yeah, that all needed to be investigated. He's not had much track time as well. Mexico's a circuit I don't think he's been at. So it's a lot of things combined, and learning himself with a new circuit, a new car, a new team. A totally different kettle of fish is Formula E. So again, for Daruvala, yep, this is exactly what I expected from him in these first few races. Just get more mileage under the belt, do it cleverly, don't take any risks, and he didn't do any of that. And we saw one wide moment, didn't we, at turn 1 early on in the race where he lost a few positions and went to the back of the pack. But apart from that, the rest of the race itself, we didn't see anything of him, but that's a good thing. It was just getting the mileage in. So yeah, Jehan Daruvala gets the same score as Nick de Vries. It's 5.5 to him. Yep, his teammates up there rivaling and fighting for podiums. That's fine at the moment. I don't want to go too harsh on Jehan right now. He's a debutant. He's the only rookie on the field. He does need a few races to get up to speed, and I'm sure with these races coming thick and fast, we've got 3 races together, of course, the Diriyah double header. I think he can take that away with the break that we've got now with no Hyderabad. take that information in, you know, do some more simulator work, and I think he'll come back stronger after this point. Maybe take until around Monaco to really show his true form. But for now, JeanEric Vergne, a solid start, 5.5 to him. Next up, it is Nico Müller in the Abt. Now, he had a decent qualifying, actually, for that Abt Cupra. Was up there in around 14th, if I remember rightly, from memory. And in the race itself, was running in that order until he got punted off by Antonio Felix da Costa. Sent him off into the wall and went tumbling down to the back of the grid. Was lucky, really, to keep going, but obviously that car was damaged. He did have a hefty whack by da Costa and then a hefty whack into the barrier as well. But did keep it going, did keep it running, and got the mileage under his belt for Abt. So, yeah, Nico Müller, a tough start to the season. Once again, the luck deserting him. I don't think points would have been possible, but I think with the qualifying pace that he had and the early race pace that he showed, it could have easily been in that gaggle with the likes of Mitch Evans downwards, of course. That gaggle of about 9-10 cars, he could have easily been on the back of that. Maybe we could have done a cheeky move and got another couple of places. I think realistically, if nothing had gone wrong that race, Müller would have finished where Eduardo Mortara did in that 13th position. But as it was, here he is down in 17th, which is a great shame because he did deserve more from that race. Wasn't his fault at all getting taken out. That was all on da Costa. And for that reason, it's going to be a solid 6 to him. A great start, good qualifying. The race itself came undone, no fault of his own. Don't want to criticise him too much, but at the same time, you know, other drivers did have a better drive overall and were able to keep themselves out of trouble. So yeah, Nico Müller, an okay start, not his fault. Frustrated, I'm sure. Abt will be frustrated as well. And yeah, good pace. Showed some good promise there. But ultimately, came to nothing. So yeah, 6-2, Nico Müller. And last of the runners, it is Dan Tinctum in the ERT, the team. And yeah, what could be said for Dan Tinctum? Overall, you know, qualifying was just total bust for him, wasn't it? Poor soul there. Lucas Di Grassi crashed. Strewn himself across the track as well as a barrier, and Dan Tinctum came round and that barrier was in the middle of the track, couldn't avoid it, and Dan Tinctum just couldn't avoid the barrier at all. Unfortunately, it was right in the middle of the track, right in the middle of the racing line, and hit the barrier, which of course went into the wall, bounced off the wall and hit the car again, broke his front wing. It was out anyway, it was yellow flags in that zone anyway, so wouldn't have been able to improve, and just totally ruined any chance. So lined up on the back row of the grid, joining Nick De Vries, I think, and in the race itself, they went for a conservative approach after that first safety car period where they were just like, look, let's really save energy here, hope for a second safety car, and then we could just go breezing past everyone at the end. We've seen that from the Neo squad before, of course. Yeah, it's under ERT now, but of course they're doing the same philosophy. Look, we've not really got the pace, but if we get the energy, we can fall back. As long as we don't lose a lap, we're okay. You know, we can stay on the back, stay within around 30 seconds of everyone else, get a late safety car, we've got loads more energy than everyone else, catch the back of the pack up and go bombing up the inside of everyone. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible for Dan Tinctum today. Finished over 30 seconds behind the next car, of course, which was a shame to see. So for Dan Tinctum, ultimately, it's going to be 5.5 to him as well. I've given him the same score as De Vries and Daruvella. That car's looking a little bit tricky, looking a bit difficult. Needs a bit of funding, that team, doesn't it? It looks like one of those teams that just really, like Team Hard of British touring cars kind of thing. You know, they've got the willpower there, they've got the staff, they've got the resources. They just need the funding, and they really do need to get on top of things. So yeah, for now, Dan Tinctum, a frustrating start to his season, but ultimately did nothing wrong. 5.5 to Dan Tinctum. Then we come to the first retirement on this list, the last that happened in the race, of course. That's all the race runners done. It's the list of retirements now, unfortunately. For the list of retirements, all they can do is be scored a maximum of 5 points based on their race weekend's performance overall. I don't think it's fair if a retirement driver got more than, say, a driver that actually finished the race. So that's my ethos, that's my philosophy. The drivers can only score a maximum of 5 points if they are a retirement, no matter what was happening during the race. And yeah, for Robin Freitz is the next one we come to, and he of course crashed it into the wall on the second to last corner. There was a car coming out the attack zone. He obviously went a little bit wider to compensate for that, got it on the dirt, slid and stuffed it into the wall. It was down the order anyway. Unfortunately, a software issue on the car meant he didn't get off the line. He qualified himself in 8th, I think it was, so it was decent-ish but not as good as his teammate. Obviously then frustrated and trying to make his way through a pack that was already difficult to overtake at a circuit that's tough at, and in the end got it wrong, got it in the wall. Nil point for Robin Freitz. Another tough weekend for him. Remember this time around 12 months ago he broke his wrist here in a first lap incident and then had to miss several races as a result. Well, here this time thankfully he's okay, walks away uninjured from this one, but again another hefty hit into the barrier and another pointless Mexico weekend. For Robin Freitz I have awarded him 2 points. 2 points, which is probably a little bit generous considering I only score him a maximum of 5 for retirements, but you know, I could understand his frustration after the software issue meant he couldn't get off the line, tumbled to the back of the order, was desperate to try and pick off the places and get any positioning advantage he could, overcooked it a little bit and stuffed it in the wall. Big shame, but hopefully more to come for Robin Freitz in Diriyah. But for now, just 2 points to him. Next on this list, it is of course Antonio Felix da Costa. And there we have it, I'm afraid. It is a Andre Lotterer of the week to Antonio Felix da Costa, which means he will score nil points this race and have an Andre Lotterer slapped at the side of his name in the tallies, which is a great shame to say, but when Pascal Wehrlein's winning the race, Antonio Felix da Costa qualifies 16th and then stuffs it up the inside of Nico Muller, ruining his own race, ruining Nico Muller's race, damaging his car and retiring ultimately from it. Nil points versus 28 points for his teammate for taking the pole position lap time as well, of course. Yeah, you know, it's a tale of two fortunes, isn't it? Pascal Wehrlein, 28 out of a maximum 29 during this weekend, and then Antonio Felix da Costa, nil points after a poor qualifying, a poor race, and then contact with a driver after a desperate lunge, taking himself out of the race and affecting another car heavily as well, which is not acceptable. So yes, Andre Lotterer of the week to Antonio Felix da Costa. Then we come to Lucas Di Grassi, and what a shame for Lucas Di Grassi this weekend. An error in qualifying, stuffing into the barrier and affecting other drivers in their qualifying as well, unfortunately, means that, yeah, it was a difficult one. It was a bad start for him down the back of the field, and then only completed a couple of laps and had to retire due to brake failure in the end. Certainly not brake failure, but braking issues, regen issues, so they retired the car on the grounds of safety. For Lucas Di Grassi, I've gone for a generous 4. I have given him a very generous 4 there, but nonetheless, I think that, you know, there's potential there. It just didn't deliver ultimately this time around. He was trying to improve his lap time, but when he stuffed it, the app car's obviously a difficult one to drive. Needs to adjust to that. But yeah, a generous 4. I will admit that's generous, but I do like Di Grassi, so showing a little bit of bias there already. But nonetheless, you know, an accident, but ultimately retired in the race where it was too early on to judge what he could have done. He could have ended up coming through the field quite well. Could have been in that Mitch Evans gaggle at some point. You just don't know, do you? So yeah, app this weekend had a difficult one, and that's that. So yeah, 4 to Di Grassi. And then last but by no means least, we come to Sergio Sette Camara, who didn't even start the race due to a software issue with the car. They believe it was the inverter that was not playing ball, and unfortunately didn't get to make the start. Based on this weekend overall, Sergio Sette Camara did absolutely nothing wrong at all this weekend. It's a middle of the road 5 to him. The maximum he can score has been a retirement or a did not starter. Yeah, unfortunately just couldn't see what he was capable of. You know, qualifying he was better than his teammate Dan Tinctum for obvious reasons. Tinctum got impeded, but that's not the point, you know. Out-qualified him in that sense and then couldn't take his spot on the grid because, yeah, the inverter packed up, unfortunately. So, yeah, there you go. So, for Sergio Sette Camara, it is a middle of the road 5. A maximum, though, for a retirement. And that's that. So there we have everything, guys. Those were the runners and riders of the Mexico E-Prix. Let me know your thoughts and feedback down below. Did I score any drivers too high, any too low? The standings, of course, with the scores I have just awarded are on the screen now for you to take a look at. Of course, it's all very much academic at the moment, but Pascal Wehrlein there out on top. Meanwhile, his teammate Antonio Felix da Costa there on 0 with 1 L at the side of him. 1 loser. Yeah, unfortunately for Antonio Felix da Costa, that was an absolute nightmare weekend, wasn't it? But his teammates sitting pretty on top of the actual standings in Formula E, and very much standing on top of the standings as well in this Cruel Corner Championship. A massive thanks as always goes out to Dan for providing me with a scoreboard for this series. I really appreciate it, buddy. You might have noticed he's gone a little bit back to basics this time around with the scoreboard, but that's because he's planning something very, very special for the Formula 1 ones, which are, of course, coming later on in the year, and that will take a lot of his time and effort up to do. So yeah, I've just said, look, let's do a little cheap one here, shall we? Welcome to the cheap seat, so to speak. We'll keep it rough and ready on this series, but we're certainly going to deliver in the Formula 1 crawl room when that comes back. I can't wait to show you because it's so exciting. And of course, before I go, don't forget to enter the competition if you made it this far. Be subscribed to the channel, drop a like on this video and comment down below your favourite moment of the Mexico City E-Prix race. I'll pick one of you at random. I will then contact you with an email address to contact me at. Send me your address to me and I'll get that out in the post here. Winners will be announced... what's the time this video going up? We're going up on a Monday at 6. I'll announce the winner on Friday. So you've got a week. You've got 5 days. You've got till Friday. I'll keep monitoring the comments. One per person as well, by the way. Thanks a lot for watching, and as always, much love.